The Chicago Bulls take the court for their second preseason game today, taking on the Cleveland Cavaliers again, this time home in Chicago. What am I looking for in the Bulls' second preseason game? We're going to talk a little bit about that. Plus, Chris Mannix mentions that Nikola Vucevic's trade market may be more robust than initially thought. We're going to talk about all that, plus a new Bulls signing and more right after this. What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content today, y'all. And preseason game 2 will be live during the game, but what are we looking for in that game? There's a couple of things here that I have on this list, not everything that I'm looking for, but some of the main things I'm looking for in this game. Number one, can Matas repeat his performance in the first game against the Cleveland Cavaliers? Can he do that, or can it even be better, right? Can Matas do it again? You know, when you look at, he scored 19 points in that first preseason game, and he did so in a variety of ways, taking players off the dribble, the left-handed layup, like just the things that Matas Buzelis did while still looking very athletic, giving more of an effort on the defensive side of the ball. Can he follow that up, and how does he look in following that up? I also want to look at, like, what's the balance, right? We saw Matas Buzelis get more opportunity to be on ball, especially with Josh Giddey not playing in the second half of that game. Do we see more of that worked in? It's one game sample size, but it does seem like Billy Donovan is using this opportunity with Kobe White being out, amongst other things, to allow Matas Buzelis to do more ball handling, to allow him to create more for himself and for others, to develop that point forward aspect of his game, which we talked about when we were scouting Matas Buzelis, is that he has that modern point forward type game, ability. But, we didn't get to see him do a lot on ball last year as a rookie, and that's kind of understandable, right? He had other things that he needs to focus on, and I don't even know how much we see it in the regular season this year yet, but this preseason still opens up an opportunity for him to do it, and I can't see what he does with his on-ball opportunities, both as a scorer and as a facilitator, right? And then one of the questions that I have here is, do the Cavs change up the way that they defend Matas Buzelis? Seeing what he did against them in that first game. Now, if this was a regular season game, I would know that they were going to adjust the way they defend him. But with it being preseason, they may not put that level of focus on it. They may. I mean, you still want to get ready for the season. And with, the Cleveland Cavaliers having championship aspirations this season, they're going to want to try a lot of things defensively themselves. And so, even though Matas did a solid job with having Evan Mobley on him at times, do they try to trap Matas? Do they try to get the ball out of his hands a little bit more? Considering how much of his shot attempts were at the rim, I believe 7 of his 11 or 6 of his 11 shot attempts were right at the rim, and he converted on 5 of those. Do they try now to keep him away from the rim and force him to be more of a jump shooter? How does he respond to that if they do try to force him to become more of a jump shooter, right? These are all part of the growth of Matas Buzelis anyway. These are all things that we want to see from Matas. So we have that opportunity in just the second preseason game for a team to adjust to him and try to maybe even keep the ball out of his hand some. It'll be interesting. The Cavs have the frontline defense to try to do that against Matas Buzelis. And so, if they put in that effort to try to, force him out of his comfort zone, to see how he responds to that just 2 preseason games in, give us a kind of a nice sample size on what how Matas is going to be comfortable to the added pressure he's going to face this season, right? And Billy Donovan talked about that this season, Matas isn't sneaking up on anybody. So how he's guarded is going to change. And, hearing that Matas Buzelis reached out to Derrick Rose, we already know that Dosunmu said that he's talked to Matas about how to, avoid some of the things that Io went through in his second year. As far as Derrick Rose, how to avoid the sophomore slump. And so, Matas is doing the right things as far as listening. And that's the special part about Matas, is that he's always willing to learn. And he feels like he can learn from any and everyone, both their mistakes and their successes. And he's being that sponge. And that's why there's so much confidence. I love, over the last 2 days, basically since the game, just how much Matas is talked about on the national stage with his play. And, that's great. But, follow it up, because the moment that you look good, they're going to be ready to call you a bust or not living up to the hype. So seeing Matas in game 2 is going to be really important for the Bulls here. Next up, Josh Giddey. Josh Giddey didn't have, I can't say that he didn't make an impact. That would be unfair. He did make an impact. I want to be clear there. And I think that he played, he facilitated really well in that first game against the Cleveland Cavaliers. He created really well. His shooting was not anything to write home about. He didn't shoot the ball effectively at all. He didn't take a lot of shots, and that may have been by design. We know that Billy Donovan came out after the fact and said, that they set him as a precaution because, he did suffer an ankle injury in practice. They didn't want to try to do too much with him, and maybe that was it. But in 14 minutes, going 1 of 4 from the field, he did get to the free throw line 2 times. I'm interested to see how much better does his offense look in game 2. His facilitating was fine. 5 assists, 3 steals from Josh Giddey. I would even go so far as to saying Josh Giddey looked, at least in the first preseason game, a lot more engaged defensively. But we know that like when Josh Giddey has smaller guards on him, or he's defending smaller guards, I should say, he's always been pretty solid as far as being a solid defensive player in those times, right? So that's always kind of been Josh Giddey's game. He does know how to use his size advantage, especially when guarding other point guards in the paint. He's been really good at that over the course of his career. And I mean, for what it was worth, like we saw with what he was doing. So, but I'm looking at offensively from Josh Giddey. He's a little bit more aggressive. If not, it's not going to be the end of the world if he's not. Like it's preseason. Don't get too far up on the good. Don't get too far down on the bad during preseason. Preseason is kind of its own unique beast, right? You're looking more at what they're trying to do stylistically, things like that, the play style, the schemes. That's what you're kind of looking at. But I want to see if Josh Giddey's a little bit more aggressive offensively in this game, because the facilitating was there. The rebounding was solid. 3 rebounds in 14 minutes for Josh Giddey. That's really solid. You look at him playing his normal minutes, closer to 28, between 28 and 30 minutes. He's probably getting 6 or 8 rebounds, right? So, those things were looking good. They project to be good, but I just want to see if he's going to be a little bit more aggressive for just kind of my own feeling. Like he finished the season in a very aggressive run there as far as offensively. I'm just interested to see how much of that carries over into the season. So we'll see there. Outside of that, and before that, when we get off Josh Giddey, I do like overall, do the starters play with better energy, right? Like we'll talk about the bench unit here in a second. One thing is that the Bulls kind of started off the game outside of Isaac Okoro, on those possessions where he was guarding Donovan Mitchell, and you could tell that he was out there to prove a point. He was trying to lock people up. But outside of that, the starters didn't necessarily start off the game with the best energy. Once Trey and Io got into the game, like the energy picked up, and then I think we maintained that throughout the most of the game. So I want to see if the starters come in with kind of more energy, right? Now, more physicality, those type of things. And it could be very well because they know they're not going to play a lot of minutes. It could be taking it light out there, those type of things. It's possible. We didn't have a single starter play over 19 minutes. Giddy played 14. Madison, Isaac played 18 each, and then you had Nikola Vucevic and Kevin Huerter playing 19 each minute. So, that's what happened there. But do the starters start off with a little bit of energy? Nikola Vucevic, Kevin Huerter, and Josh Giddey all scored 3 points. We had 11 from Isaac Okoro and 19 from Matas Buzelis. But other than that, like most of our scoring was done off the bench, which brings us to our next topic, right? How does the bench unit look for the Chicago Bulls, right? Does the bench continue to look like a weapon? I said it on the show afterwards that the Bulls bench looks like something that could be a really big weapon for this team this upcoming year. Now, we scored 79 points off the bench in last game. That's a little bit inflated due to the starters not playing over 20 minutes. But when you look at it from the players that we know are going to have a role on this team, Dosunmu, Trey Jones, Zach Collins, we scored 39 points between those players coming off the bench, which is really freaking good, right? And if you go in and add Patrick Williams to that, that was another 11 points, right? So that's 50 total points coming off the bench from players that we kind of know are going to be in the rotation. Now, they except for Patrick, they're still up in the air about Patrick Williams, right? But that's a good mark. Now, it's inflated as well because they just played, more minutes and the starters didn't play as much. But I really, from that first preseason game, walked away feeling like this bench could be special this season. And I think it could be a very fun bench to watch. I'm not willing to call it the bench mob yet. I'm not willing to say that we have a bench mob again. I need to see it consistent in the regular season before I say that, right? Again, not getting too far up, not getting too far down on preseason performance, but I just want to see how this bench continues to bring it and their play style and their chemistry together. we got into a really good groove with those players while they were out there. And that shouldn't be a surprise. When Trey Jones and Zach Collins came to this team along with Kevin Huerter, that's really when we started to find the identity that we finished the season with. And so these guys are all veterans that know exactly what they bring to the basketball court. And like I've said many times, the benefit of it is that we're not looking for them to do too much outside of just what their natural skill set is. That's when you can get in a rhythm as a player, when it's like, hey, exactly what you do when you thrive at, that's what we need you to do. We don't need you to do too much out of it. If you do, and if you catch the rhythm, if you catch a game where you're scoring your three-point shot, you just can't miss, great, we'll use you there. But just be solid in what you do day in and day out. And I think that's going to be a thing that definitely helps this team as well. So we shall see. But I'm excited to see that bench unit and how they continue to perform as well. And just the balance of the bench unit. You know, we went 10 players deep before we even got to Patrick Williams, right? Is Patrick Williams still the 11th guy off the bench? And another question there, Noah Essengay, with the way that he performed, with his activity, with his energy, getting to the free throw line as many times he did, which is one of his most translatable skills from playing overseas, is the shot blocking and the lob threat, and then the activity, right? Those are things that you like to see from Noah Essengay. Does he get in the game a little bit earlier than the fourth quarter now? Does Billy Donovan look at what he did in the first game and say, all right, you did really good in those minutes against, you know, the third stringers and some G League guys. Let's get you out there earlier in the third quarter now. Let's get you against some actual NBA competition. You know, still probably going to be bench guys at that point, but let's see how you do then. And, you know, that again, that's what preseason is for. We know that in the regular season, those minutes are probably going to be hard to come by for Noah Essengay, but Noah and P. Will specifically, with the way that they performed and what they were asked to do, did that earn them an opportunity to get out there a little bit earlier, right? And I'm all about, if you earn it, I'm all about that, right? I'm not the highest guy on P. Will. You guys know that. I say that all the time. I used to be a P. Will defender. I'm not a P. Will defender anymore, right? I'm at this point with P. Will where, you know, if he ends up being the 12th guy in the rotation, I'm not surprised by that. But at the same time, I'm not going to turn a blind eye to if a player can get to the free throw line almost 6 times for you coming off the bench, put up 11 points, and play solid defense. That's a player that you want coming off your bench. Is he still overpaid? Yes. Should he be drafted 4th overall? No. But those are things that are in the past. I'm looking at what P. Will can do in the role that he's in now. And he showed a little bit of that in the game against the Cleveland Cavaliers. And I'm not going to let what's happened over his career or my frustration with him as a player make me blind to what we saw. We saw him play pretty damn well. And Noah Essengay, in his minutes, he played pretty damn well also, showing how his activity and his length just puts pressure on benches. Like that, the way that Noah tried to go after every offensive rebound, the way that he tried to go after every rebound period that he was out there. And then when he was near the rim, he used his length to try to put it up, which got him to the free throw line. Those are things that can put pressure on defenses. If you can get players in foul trouble just by your activity, I mean, look, that's something that can help. So, you know, if Noah Essengay continues to do that, if P. Will continues to play the way that he has, I mean, I'm not mad at if you want to see how much they can do against, you know, slightly better competition as we go through this preseason. So I'm not mad at that, seeing how those guys play out. And then, of course, you know, Dalen Terry made the game-winning save, right, on that block. You know, Julian Phillips still played 2 minutes. Dalen Terry played 17. He played more minutes than P. Will. I'm interested to see how those guys continue to look and shape up, right? How do they continue to play for this team? And, you know, we'll see what happens in the bench. But overall, those are kind of the main things that I'm looking for against the Cleveland Cavaliers. You're at home in the United Center. And, you know, you're riding into this. I don't know if you could say confidence. Like, are you coming out of a preseason game with a bunch of confidence? I don't know. But, you know, coming to this game, play hard, give a solid performance, and that's really all that we're looking for in preseason. Again, I know some people are going to live and die by if the Bulls win or not in preseason. That's not necessarily where I am, but that's what I'm looking for in this game from the Chicago Bulls. You guys can let me know some of the things that you're looking for the most in this preseason game. Let me know that down below. With that said, let's get into the next topic, man. So, Sports Illustrated Chris Mannix talked about there being maybe more buzz around a potential Nikola Vucevic trade than what we thought. We've heard things like there are no trade market for Nikola Vucevic. I've been somebody to say, you know, when you're a veteran and you're an expiring contract, and teams are looking at the situation of the Bulls and saying, hey, we don't really think the Bulls are going to re-sign this guy. Why would we trade assets for him unless, you know, something happens in the season where you feel like you need that, right? So Chris Mannix says this in his article. In Chicago, the endless trade chatter around Nikola Vucevic is expected to pick up. The Bulls finally seem to settle on the direction, building a team around young talent of Josh Giddey, Kobe White, Matas Buzelis, Patrick Williams, etc. Now, I don't know if Patrick Williams is part of that, but there you go on that one. Vucevic is set to make a very tradable $21.4 million on the final year of his deal. Will be appealing to teams to look for more offensive firepower in the front court. So let's see on this, right? Listen, I know that a lot of Bulls fans want Nikola Vucevic gone. Shout out to my boy C-Dub on the Shy Bulls podcast with the Cognac Boys. Go and check them out. He's been beating this drum for a while as far as let's get Vooch out of here. Let's change the style of center that we have here and get a guy that's kind of more, defensive minded, that can protect the rim more, and let's see what that does for this team. And I understand that mindset. That is the kind of picture perfect center that you want on this team, right? Let's make no mistake about it. Now, I do think that Vooch still has his benefits that he provides for this team. Being a consistent half-court threat, being a consistent double-double guy, that does allow some pressure to come off of guys like Matas Buzelis who are developing. I think that. Now, I have had the mindset, and my conspiracy theory is I think that the Bulls are going to shop Nikola Vucevic leading into the trade deadline, as they did Lonzo Ball. And like they did with Lonzo Ball, I fully think that there is a possibility that he signs a contract extension with the Bulls if a trade's not found. Now, that contract extension doesn't necessarily mean that the goal is for him to stay here long term, but it could be a method to say, okay, you don't want to do a deal with us here at the trade deadline because Vooch is not locked in. Bet we're going to lock him to a contract. Let's holler at you in the offseason. And there also is this thought process that if you don't have another starting caliber center, are the Bulls going to let Vooch go? Right now, Vooch has power himself. He doesn't have to sign an extension with the Bulls. He doesn't have to sign a contract with the Bulls at the end of the season. He is an unrestricted free agent. And that is power that we've seen players wield to their benefit every single year, right? And so, Vooch has the power to control his destiny and control how he finishes out his career, because this next contract could very well be his last contract in the NBA, especially if he signs a 3-4-year deal. That could be it. Like, Vooch would be 39, almost 40 by the end of that deal, right? So that's what you're looking at for Vooch. And we'll see what happens there. Now, I do think Vooch and his family bought a house here in Chicago. I do think there's something to be said about finishing your career and not having to move around a lot. But if Vooch wants to compete and wants to compete for something meaningful, it could lead him to want to go other places. So we'll see. I'm not willing to say one way or another exactly what happens with Nikola Vucevic. There are a lot of different options that can happen here. But when you hear things like Khalil Ware may not be starting in Miami, when we know that the Golden State Warriors could very well be looking for a center by time they're ready for their playoff run, right? The Indiana Pacers, if their team fights above its weight and is better than some people are giving them credit for, they could be looking for some front court depth. There's a lot of teams. Now, the type of center that they're looking for could very well be different than the skill set that Vooch has. And that's something that you have to play for that as well. So we'll see. The trade chatter, if Vooch plays well and is expiring, the trade chatter is going to be high. Now, chatter does not necessarily mean a deal is imminent, right? And that's the thing that we have to separate this from. There's going to be a lot of trade talk around a lot of these Bulls players. All the expiring contracts that we have, all the place where the Bulls are trying to figure out their future, all that type of stuff. The trade chatter is going to be crazy around the Bulls between now and the trade deadline. It just is. And if the Bulls do look or play better than people are expecting for them to at the start of the season, oh, beware. It's going to get even worse, right? So we'll end up seeing. Sports Illustrated is kind of hit or miss with their articles as well. Not a shot at Chris Mannix or anything there. The writers, if they end up watching this, like it's not a shot at anybody. It's just, Sports Illustrated in their written articles has become as much speculation, which is fine in sports. Like, let's be clear. Speculation is what most of us are doing day in and day out on this team, right? So that's perfectly fine. And I think you just have to learn to separate the speculation from the reporting. And those are very different things. You can report on something and you can speculate on something. I just think as a content creator, you have to be clear to which one that you're doing that with, right? So that's just my thought process on that. But you guys can let me know what you think down below. As things stand right now, hearing that the market for Nikola Vucevic could pick up. We've heard that before, though. But do you think Vooch finishes this season in a Chicago Bulls uniform, just this season? Not talking about past the season. Does he finish this season in a Chicago Bulls uniform, or is he on another team by time the season ends? Let me know what you guys think on that down below. Quick update here before we go. The Bulls signed Kevin Knox last night to a new deal. They did this around 4:30 p.m. Chicago time, around that time, I think. And, a lot of people ask why. What does this mean? Is this going to put pressure on P. Will? Is this putting pressure on Jalen and Dalen, Julian and Dalen Terry? Here's the thing. No. They signed him to an Exhibit 10 deal. And keep in mind, the thing with an Exhibit 10 deal is that as long as you sign that deal, you could then get cut 24 hours later, and then you sign a G League contract with that same team and gets them a little bit of extra money. The Bulls did this with Kenny Lofton Jr. last season. They've done it with a player almost every year, right? It is just about getting a little bit of extra money for a player that's coming to your G League team. He's G League bound. I don't know if he ever even plays a preseason game for the Chicago Bulls. That's what this is about. He's going to be on the Bulls G League team more than likely, and this just gives him I think it's a extra $200K. I'm not sure on that number. It could be a little bit lower than that. But it just gets him a little bit extra money. And it's just you taking care of a player that's willing to come play for your G League team, that has some NBA experience, and you're just trying to find a way to get them more money. It doesn't mean that he's part of the plan. Doesn't mean the Bulls are waiving anybody to re-sign him. It's an Exhibit 10 deal. It's not even a two-way contract. So there you go on that one. So that's just my thought there. I just wanted to give that. We did a breaking news live stream for it on the YouTube channel. I didn't post it as a podcast because it just felt like it was much ado about nothing. So I wanted to throw it on the end of this episode. But that's my time for today, guys. Make sure you guys are following us at Bulls Central Pod. If you send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullscentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and or voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that is thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.